When I stepped back into the ballroom, my eyes went at once to the cake table where I'd left Grace a few minutes earlier, expecting to find her still enduring the steady parade of insincere compliments. The table stood empty, which explained matters well enough. Grace endured the attention of half the town with admirable patience, and Cyril possessed a slight distaste for crowds even on the best of evenings. If I knew them as well as I believed, the moment I stepped away from them, they would have seized the opportunity to slip somewhere quiet. The call with my father settled the last of the arrangements. Our families would be reunited as one beneath the same roof the following day to receive us, and every wretched year between then and now was laid to rest. As I made for the terrace doors, I relieved a passing waiter of 3 champagne flutes, deciding that if anyone found fault with a bit of celebration on a night like this, they were welcome to keep the opinion to themselves. I would be a civilian again soon enough in any case. So tonight, at least for a few hours, I meant to share a drink with the 2 best friends I ever had. I stepped out onto the terrace expecting nothing more remarkable than a quieter corner of the evening. But instead, I found Grace collapsing into Cyril's arms. For a moment, my mind resisted the scene before me, not because the explanation was difficult to reach, but because I'd spent the last days attempting to manage the very conditions that would prevent precisely this sort of outcome. I saw the absurdity of it then, how I was arriving with champagne to celebrate, only to find her barely able to stand. I set the glasses aside without another thought and moved towards them. Is she all right? But Cyril didn't appear the least bit troubled as he set her right on her feet again. If anything, his expression suggested he found the whole scene quite entertaining. "Oh yes," he said. "I should say she's back to her old self now." There'd been something distant in her eyes since I first walked through her bakery door, a reminder that the woman standing before me struggled with a past she couldn't yet reach, but the dreamy haze about her was gone now. "Christy," she said. What followed did not unfold in any of the stages I'd prepared myself for. I expected memory, if it returned, to do so by degrees. A face first, perhaps, or a place we'd been together. Some thread pulled free and followed back through the dark. Instead, it came upon me whole when she called me the ridiculous name she'd once so liked to torture me with. The shock of it left me momentarily useless. My heart missed its rhythm altogether, then drove hard enough to force the blood through me in a rush, as though my body grasped the meaning of the moment before my thoughts caught up. I'd already been reunited with Grace, it's true. I'd stood near her, spoken to her, arranged her days, and guarded her sleep, but this was not the same woman who had looked at me with that question always in her eyes. This was the girl I came for and carried in my mind so long that at times she seemed more invention than memory. She rushed at me before I entirely processed what happened, throwing her arms around my neck. "Oh, Christy, please take me home. I want to go home." Now, this was the girl who ran to me before anyone else for comfort when the world proved too much for her patience. The girl who argued with me on every conceivable point, yet still trusted me when the moment required it. She'd never felt the least obligation to keep a distance between us or cared whether I might welcome the closeness. She simply took it because it was due to her. Yes, this was my spoiled little Grace. Even the scent of her carried the same certainty now. Beneath the perfume and the confectioner's sugar clinging to her remained something unmistakably her own. The faint warmth in her hair I would have recognized anywhere. I glanced at Cyril over her shoulder with a look that said whatever happened had better not have resulted from any well-meaning interference on his part. He lifted both hands to defend himself before I had so much as drawn breath, his smile suggesting he found the entire business rather satisfying. "It was not me," he said. "She began telling me a story about you as a child and caught herself saying it. What struck me wasn't that she remembered, but that she came back by way of me. Not by coaxing, not by careful prompting, but by reaching for something belonging to us alone. I spent the better part of my life shaping every decision, every alliance, every sacrifice around the promise that one day I would return her to her own name and her own place in the world. A man might devote himself to such a task forever without ever knowing whether the devotion meant anything beyond his own stubborn loyalty. Yet she remembered me first. A trivial thing to anyone else, perhaps, but it landed with a satisfaction I made no effort to conceal, because if there had ever been doubt that the bond between us ran in both directions, she settled it in the clearest manner possible. I brought my hands up to her face and drew her back far enough to look at her. "And your Christie will get you there." It was the moment I'd crossed an ocean countless times for, and I'd spent too long arranging the world so that it might exist to mishandle it now. And so I kissed her. There was nothing hurried and passionate in it, only the sweetness of two people who loved each other dearly reconnecting after nearly a lifetime apart. Her mouth trembled, soft, with both relief and a trace of fear. It wasn't much, only a brief thing. But perfection, I realized, did not announce itself with grandeur. When I drew back from her, the thought returned that not 24 hours remained until we were home again. The distance between the past and the life waiting for her in England had once stretched so wide I stopped measuring it altogether. Now it had collapsed into something so small it scarcely seemed possible. I motioned towards the open doors of the ballroom behind us and began leading us towards it, her arms around my shoulders still as she followed me. "That was Father on the phone," I said as I stepped backwards. "He and Edmund will meet our plane tomorrow evening." I had no intention of burdening her with the long list of difficulties still waiting beyond the flight. None of it mattered at the moment. That night required only the simplest task of all, for Grace to be herself again. "We shall eat our next supper at Blackmere, my darling, and this is something worth celebrating, is it not?" She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes even as a smile began to find its way across her face. We reached the table where I'd abandoned the champagne, and I kept one arm about her while reaching out with the other to reclaim a glass. The days ahead might still demand many things of us, but surrendering the privilege of holding her again was not amongst them. "So," I said as I handed the glass to Cyril, "we are going to dance." I reached back to the table for the second glass and held it between us for her, and she slid one hand from my shoulder to take it. "And we are going to drink." I reached once more to the table for the final glass, shifting us just enough that Grace and I now faced Cyril together, raising the glass in his direction. "Until we have forgotten all about this dreadful place. Amen," I said, lifting the glass a little higher. "To tomorrow, to England, and to Grace."